20-month-old Quinton Simon went missing from his home in October 2022. Almost 2 months later, his remains were found and his own mother was charged with his murder, along with a host of other charges. This is the tragic tale of Quinton Simon. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today's case is one I've wanted to cover for a while. I've been following it. As you know, I am relatively obsessed with cases that involve child abuse and death because I worked in safeguarding during my career for a very long time, and the protection of children is still at the heart of the work that I do and that I believe passionately within. This case is as devastating as all the cases that I cover. And I think that when you're dealing with a case where a primary caregiver is the person who's been arrested for that death, it just puts into sharp focus the mismatch between what we believe a parent, carer and nurturer is going to act like towards their child and the reality when it comes down to certain individuals. And also just the unfairness that these individuals are blessed with these gifts of babies when so many of us struggle to have children ourselves and fail at times to be able to do that. And yet these kind of individuals can just pop them out without any compassion at all within their nature. And definitely today's case is going to highlight exactly that. So on the 5th of October 2022 at 5:30 a.m, Diana MacArthur, who was a babysitter for the family, got a text message from Leilani Simon saying that she didn't have to babysit the child that morning. Now it turns out Diana MacArthur was very close to Quinton, and since all this has played out, she's had some quite aggressive altercations with Leilani Simon's own mother, the grandmother in this case, because Diana has felt devastated by the loss of Quinton. Now, on the same morning at 9:40 a.m, so it's a Wednesday morning at this point in Savannah, Georgia, 22-year-old Leilani Simon, the mother of Quinton, reports that her 20-month-old son is missing. Now, it's really strange, isn't it, that earlier that morning, the babysitter receives this text saying that she's not required for babysitting, but there isn't a mention at that point of the fact that her son has basically disappeared. That's very strange as far as I'm concerned from the get-go, because if your child was missing, arguably you wouldn't need babysitting, but your priority would be my child's missing, not that you wouldn't want the babysitter to turn up. So that in itself immediately rings alarm bells. Now apparently he'd gone missing from the home on Buckhalter Road, and she told 911 that she thinks someone came in and took him. And she basically is said to be quite hysterical in the background, saying that he's been taken. She claimed that she'd woken up at 9:30 a.m, found the door of the house open and her son had gone. So she tells investigators that Quinton had last been seen about 6 a.m. by her boyfriend Daniel Youngkin, and apparently at this point he was playing in his playpen. Again, just think about the time context. 6 a.m. and the child's meant to be playing in a playpen. Children of that age are not usually up at that time unless you were up with them, and it turns out that she was not up with him. But nonetheless, this is a story that's being peddled. Now, on the morning that he went missing, it was said that he was wearing a light blue Sesame Street shirt and black pants. So right from the start, we all are going to have some suspicions about that story. It really doesn't add up even at this point. And it's certainly not going to add up throughout the story compared to what the mother is trying to suggest happens versus what we believe happened in this case. Now, the little boy in this case, Quinton Simon, gorgeous little boy. At the time of his disappearance, he's living with his mum, Leilani Simon, who I would say is the woman who had quite a complex relationship with her wider family, full stop. She had her boyfriend with her, Daniel Youngkin, also his two siblings, so Quinton's two siblings lived presently with him, and also his mother, grandmother, Billie Jo Howell, and her husband, Thomas Howell. So there's quite a big group of people essentially living under one roof. Quinton's father, biologically, wasn't actually part of his life. He lived a fair distance away from that home. Now, when Quinton went missing, his grandmother was actually out of town. So essentially, we can rule her out of being involved in any part of this disappearance immediately. And a news outlet actually found court documents that alleged that before Quinton had disappeared, there had been some real issues between the grandmother and mother in this case, and that an eviction dispute had been occurring in the house. So the grandmother in this case had sought to remove her daughter and her daughter's boyfriend from the property over alleged damage and also lack of peace. So I think we can all read into it. Having a daughter that you get to a point where you literally need to serve an eviction notice on them is going to demonstrate a lot of toxicity in the relationship. I mean, we all get into situations with people that we love. Sometimes people that we love overstay their welcome. But usually, you just have a discussion. You have that discussion, the person's like, okay, cool, I'm going to leave now. It doesn't usually result in kind of proper proceedings. You have to be pretty obstinate in refusing to remove yourself from a property to actually have something served on you. And the fact that it's stated as a lack of peace, well, understandably, we can automatically draw from that conclusion it's about a conflictual relationship. So this is all going on in the backdrop to Quinton's disappearance. And those documents also stated that Quinton's grandparents had legal custody over both himself and his older brother. And again, we know automatically, therefore, that there are problems regarding his biological mother and her ability to care for him, hence why the care was given to the grandparents. Now, it's not actually known why Leilani had lost child custody of the children, but I think we can all just make a very obvious assumption. It's not too much of a leap of faith to say because she wasn't a very good mother. There you go. One of the things that will have affected and impacted on her ability to parent is she had substance misuse issues. And I really struggle with the fact that she has got any access at this moment in time to the children, considering she is obviously not being considered a safe person to be around them. But nonetheless, she's still residing in the same place that her children are. I understand that's because the grandmother in this case is also her mother, and therefore that's why they're all living together. But still, ideally in these circumstances, there should be some separateness between the parent who is not seen as fit to provide care for the child and the child themselves. And that is not happening. She's clearly bringing that child up as her own, even though custody arrangements deny that that should be a reality. She was actually ordered to pay child support for the boys, but whether she was doing this is something I couldn't discover. I would imagine the answer is not. Also, I would imagine she wasn't paying rent, and that's why her mother was trying to get an eviction order for her. Now, allegedly, Leilani told the police that she thought Quinton's father had taken him, but the family said that this story didn't make any sense. And by 2:30 in the afternoon, on the day he was reported missing, police said that Quinton's father was not involved. They actually went and spoke to him. He lived over an hour away and he knew nothing of that accusation. Also, if my child had been taken from my property, feared abducted, or just wandered off and maybe feared involved in an accident, you would need to sedate me because I would be absolutely hysterical. I would be running around like a headless chicken, screaming. And that is certainly not the case for the mother in this situation. Now, the police take this very seriously. There is a little boy who's disappeared. And the search is carried out for Quinton Simon by Chatham County Police. Now, by Wednesday night, the search for Quinton actually involved the FBI. They had 2 helicopters, they had a drone, they had police on horses, they had tracking dogs, and they had officers going door to door. So they were fully invested in finding this child. They were fully invested in taking this little boy's disappearance super seriously, which we expect, but doesn't always happen. But in this case, 100%, they are absolutely determined to find Quinton. And I would say from the very early stages, I'm talking about the first hours of his disappearance, questions are being asked by the officers in this case. Things are not adding up. Now, on the 6th of October, they hold a press conference. And this is because the local community is racked by this disappearance. They can't believe it. And everybody wants answers. They want to know what on earth is going on. Is there somebody who's abducted a child in our local area? Do we need to be afraid for our own children? And so they need to inform the public of their thoughts. So they give this update on the search for Quinton. And very early on, they're saying that they don't believe any foul play has been involved in the disappearance and that they hope at this point that they're going to find him alive. I feel that that was trying to reassure the public not to be absolutely terrified about their community. I don't think it's believable that the police at this point genuinely think that this little child is just going to turn up. That in itself feels like it's not in line with where this investigation goes right from the get-go. I think that they wanted to reassure people that they didn't have to worry about somebody in their home who might be secretly a child abductor, or somebody in their local community at church, etc., was somebody who was a threat to their children. I think they wanted to say, look, there's no foul play involved, because they already knew that whether there was or wasn't, it wasn't from outside of the home that they'd be looking. So I think it's more that they probably knew that something terrible had happened, but they knew exactly who was responsible potentially for the disappearance, and therefore didn't want the community feeling unsafe in their world because they were concerned that there was somebody out there who was abducting children. So this is what they say initially. They hope they're going to find him alive. They continue their search. But at this point, even though they're saying they don't think any foul play is involved, they're looking in dumpers, they're looking in ditches, they're looking in drain pipes, they're looking all through the woods. And the days following the news of his disappearance, they start to issue search warrants, and they're carried out in a nearby pond, a backyard swimming pool, and also a house. Because clearly, even though they're saying they don't think anything terrible has happened to him, they certainly seem to be looking in environments which would suggest their expectation is it's likely he isn't going to be coming home alive, which is a harrowing and horrifying consideration to have to make when we're talking about the child that's involved here, a little boy, completely innocent, completely reliant on primary caregivers to make him safe, completely reliable on adults to ensure that he's kept in a secure foundation. Now, on the 8th of October, Quinton's grandparents actually talk about the fact that the mother, in this case, quote, hasn't always done the right thing. I think that's, shall we say, an understatement when it comes down to Leilani, that she hasn't always done the right thing. I think what they're trying to say is, it's really difficult to figure out when she did the right thing. The more I've learned about Leilani, I can tell you, certainly I'm struggling to find any light regarding this woman. She just seems like somebody who was potentially born bad, and then that got amplified more and more as she moved through her years. Parents went on to say, sometimes she does really great, sometimes she doesn't. And that was actually her mother saying to ABC 30. So she's actually giving interviews basically criticising her daughter. She said, I don't know what to think right now. I don't know what to believe, because I don't think anybody ever believes this is going to happen to them. I don't know if I can trust her, or I don't know. I just know I'm hurting and I want this baby home. He's my baby. So she's basically in that moment criticising her daughter, questioning her daughter, and also I would say potentially implicating her daughter in the disappearance of Quinton. They also went on in that interview to say they wanted answers. She said, whether it's the answers we want to hear or answers we don't want to hear, we just want to know something. Also, in that statement, she refers to Quinton as her baby. So I think that is very relatable when you consider that she's the person with primary custody of the child at this point, and she's bringing him up as if he is her own son. Now, a week after Quinton is actually reported missing, still not been discovered, Leilani's two other children are actually removed from her custody. And that makes sense, because we have a child who's disappeared in strange circumstances. There are two other children present at their address. Realistically, at this moment in time, the authorities are going to be thinking there are going to be big questions to answer if anything bad happens to the other children. It's probably safer whilst the investigation plays out for them to be removed and placed in foster care. Now, it makes sense that those other two children have been removed from the grandmother's custody, because bear in mind, she's actually left the children in their mother's care, but knew that she shouldn't have done that she was unfit to provide proper care because she'd already had those children removed from her care. So she's the grandmother, travels out of state, leaving the children with the parent who had been told she was not allowed custody. And of course, as the grandmother who's providing care for those children, she should have been the first port of call for protection. That was her job, and essentially she failed in that job. So the children have now been placed in foster care, and obviously there are custody proceedings that are going to play out in the courts. Now, in the first custody hearing for Quinton's two siblings, that happened at Chatham County Juvenile Court. The actual fathers of the children also appeared at the hearing. Dodie Wharton, who's one of the fathers of Leilani's children, said, referring, I presume, to his son, Zane needs to be with me. I want to make sure he's safe. He also said that he thought that the grandmother in this case, Billy Joe, would have been able to care for him. He said that now, though, he's questioning everything he'd ever thought of Leilani. He's questioning what's happened to that little boy. He said that he's really worried about his own son. He doesn't know whether his own son's hurt. He doesn't know whether his own son is safe. He doesn't want to get a call saying that your son's hurt and he's going to the hospital. So he's obviously got some real grave concerns about the safety of his child. Now he knows that Quinton's disappeared. Also, Wharton noted that the mother in this case, Leilani Simon, had struggled with her mental health in the past, also saying that she'd actually tried to overdose the spring before Quinton's disappearance when she was watching their son. He said, she's always been unpredictable, but I wasn't worried about Zane's safety until all this started going on. So obviously, the fact that now he's aware that she might be in the line of fire as the potential murderer, he's worried about protecting his own child. He did say she was a good mother. He said he just didn't know what had happened to her. But I think he probably has a very low bar of what he expects a mother to be in that case. And the reality is, he said that if he got custody of his child, it would give him a calm mind. So I understand his point of view and position. He's saying that at least he knows that if he's got custody of his own child, he knows that he can provide decent care for him. He said he deserves a good life, a life full of opportunity, and I feel like he's not getting that right now. So clearly conflicted at that custody hearing, but as I've said, both of the children were removed and they were placed in foster care because at least the authorities are aware that that care is going to provide a sufficient sense of safety for those children whilst all of this is playing out. Now, the search for Quinton became huge. It captured national attention, and obviously this meant that the authorities had to keep people up to date on what was playing out. Now, in a statement on the 13th of October, Chatham County Police said that they believed that Quinton was dead and that they'd notified Quinton's family that they believed that that was the case and that he was deceased. And they announced that the search had now become a recovery operation. So they were thinking that this is going to be about bringing the body of Quinton Simon home. At this point, they also said that Quinton's mother was named as the main suspect in his disappearance and death. So like I said, I think from the very get-go, they've ultimately recognised that she was acting in a very strange way. Her story didn't add up. She kept shifting her statements. And the consequence of this was that they were looking directly at her as the main suspect. Now, at this point, no arrests were made. No charges were actually filed, even though they're giving this information out. Now, at this point, the evidence behind the announcement of Leilani as the only suspect hadn't been shared. But we've got to assume that for them to go on record saying that she is the only suspect means that they've got to have compelling evidence to make that public announcement. So bear in mind, at this point, she hasn't been arrested, and you can imagine how the local community are feeling. Not very happy. Let's just make it very clear. When the police are out there publicly saying that this mother is the responsible party for the death of a child and she hasn't been taken to prison, people are going to be asking the question why. And I don't know, thinking about creating a bit of a lynch mob maybe, because understandably people feel very, very moved by this information. They're devastated that a child has disappeared and is now presumed dead at the hands of their mother. Now, a few days later, this is on the 18th of October, authorities announced that they believed that Quinton's body had been taken to the landfill area after it had been put in a dumpster by Leilani Simon. So now they actually believe they understand how he has potentially died and also where his body has been dumped. So on the 18th of October, local law enforcement, supported by FBI agents, begin to search through the waste management landfill, which is located at Chatham County off Little Neck Road near El Scottsdale Park, from what research I've managed to pull up. Now, this search lasted for an entire month. Just imagine the amount of man hours put in there and also the horrendous job. Let's just be real. They are searching for the body of a baby. It's as simple as that. Can you imagine having to hand pick through all of that landfill, knowing that the goal of doing so is to find the body of a defenseless innocent child? That must have created such a burden and weight on the shoulders of those individuals who were actually carrying out that search. And they spent between 18 to 20 hours a day looking for Quinton's remains. They went through £1.2 million of trash. I mean, that is an unbelievable scope of search. And also, the dedication and commitment of those individuals is just profound. Now, on the first day of the landfill search, this is about 2 weeks after Quinton went missing, Quinton's mother, Leilani Simon, and also her mother, Billie Joel Howell. So bear in mind, this is the first day of the landfill search. It's about 2 weeks, as I've said, after Quinton's gone missing. Now just put yourself into that psychological situation. Your child has disappeared. Gone. They're now searching a landfill, essentially saying that they think they're going to find the body there. Where are you going to be mentally? Let's say if you're innocent, for example, you've had nothing to do with the disappearance of your child. People are looking in your direction as you being a main suspect, potential perpetrator, and this is false. And then the police are now searching a landfill saying they think they're going to find the body of your child there. Where are you going to be? You're going to be in a million, billion even pieces. Psychologically, you will be fractured beyond belief, possibly to a place of no return. You'll be beyond devastated, hiding from the world, absolutely horrified at the assumptions people are making about your guilt, and forlorn and devastated by the loss of your child and the presumed death of your child. And that is just an expected reality for anybody in such a horrendous situation. I think every single one of us will connect with that. But that's not how it works for Leilani Simon. And to be fair, not for the grandmother in this case, Billie Joe Howell. And Billie Joe Howell can say that she cares desperately about this child. Billie Joe Howell can pretend as much as she likes that she's this committed, loving grandmother. But if she truly is, then the last thing she is going to be doing with the suspected killer of that child is hanging out with them in a bar. But that's what happens. 2 weeks after this little boy has gone missing, Billie Joe Howell and Leilani Simon are spotted drinking together at a bar. They were seen at Stingray's, which is a bar in the neighbouring Tybee Island, and a server actually told the New York Post that the pair downed tequila shots and stayed at the bar for hours on the 18th of October. Now, even if you were drinking to drown your sorrows, and I know we've done it, most of us have been in a situation where we've had one too many when we're dealing with pretty awful situations. You know, we anaesthetise some of our feelings at times with alcohol. It's not a good coping strategy, but most of us can hold our hands up and say, at moments in our lives, we have reached for the bottle to deal with a terrible situation. It's not effective, it's just something that many of us will relate to. Very occasionally, we will use that to just numb the pain that we're dealing with. But you're not going to be doing that in public. You're not going to be downing tequila shots when your child or grandchild is missing within a few weeks of that child's disappearance, and certainly not on the first day that these individuals are searching landfill for his body. Also, other customers who were horrified by this, they said that they were really upset that they were just drinking publicly in the middle of an investigation, and the server told the Post they were having a great time. Like they didn't have a care in the world. They were drinking patron shots in the deck area. They were being loud and laughing. It's almost like they were trying to draw attention to themselves, which is heinous. Consider the reality of what we're talking about right now. There was a little boy who has disappeared, definitely dead. Because at the end of the day, no one's seen him, no one's found him, he's disappeared from trace. It is highly unlikely he's ever going to come home alive, and they are out basically celebrating, having fun together. And that tells me of a very toxic, strange relationship, because they're clearly quite fused and close, and yet she was trying to evict this daughter. She also suspects as a grandmother that the daughter may have had something to do with the child disappearing by saying she's not always a good parent, by obviously having some concerns about her, and yet there they are out drinking heavily together. So immediately I'm brought into this mindset of they probably both have issues around dependency. And so they're best of friends or worst of enemies during these situations. And right now they're obviously going through their best of friends stage. They also allegedly ran up a tab worth $300. So man, they were drinking. And what does that say to you as well about their boundaries and understanding of how they should be acting? If you are guilty of something, you should at least consider the impact of going out and doing what I've just said will have on people's perceptions of you. It's going to see that you are banged to rights as far as people are concerned because you don't have any emotional connection with what's really happened. So on a mental state level, neither of them compute the world effectively and appropriately, because anybody with an ounce of conscience is going to look at you and judge you harshly in that scenario. And if you need to drink, you do that behind closed doors if you understood the enormity of what was really playing out. Because you might want alcohol for a range of reasons, but you're going to know that now is not the time to be seen having fun in a bar, whether you're innocent or guilty. But clearly, neither of them got that memo. And again, that really speaks to me about the confused relationships between these two, the expectations that they have about appropriate action, and how that would play out when they are caregivers for these children. I would say it suggests something pretty negative about the both of them. Now, whilst the landfill search is being carried out, the local community and people from outside of that local community are getting more and more angry. They are protesting outside the Simon home because people are like, there is a killer in here. This person needs to be brought to justice. And during these protests, 4 people were actually arrested. One protester was arrested after they were reportedly banging on the doors and windows of the home, and she was actually charged with criminal trespassing, although I do have some real empathy towards that particular individual because she was obviously so provoked by this situation and feeling for Quinton and wanting answers, but understandably she breached the boundaries of the law by doing that and therefore was charged accordingly. Those protesters went so far as blocking the driveway. It actually stopped some people from being able to leave, and they ended up getting charged with disorderly conduct because they were ignoring the officer's orders to move. But like I said, that's because of this very visceral and cerebral feeling of what is going on? Where is the justice? This child has potentially been denied life and nothing seems to be happening. People aren't getting arrested. They wanted answers. Now, on the 28th of October, Leilani did something really weird, in my opinion. She breaks the silence, of course she does, because she's got a story to tell. She's got people to convince of her innocence. And she makes her first public comments on Quinton's disappearance. Now, bear in mind, again, if you were going to go on record being interviewed by the press and you are going to tell a story, we're looking for certain clues. We're going to see how authentic you seem. We're going to listen to your language, we're going to analyse your statements, and we're going to come to our conclusions just as you will as a jury member in court. That's what we are as humans. We're inquisitive, we're analytical. So we're listening intently to what she's saying. And she says she hoped that Quinton was found happy and alive. Now that in itself is weird. You might say, I'm desperate for my child to come home. Please, God, send him home. I just want him to be safe. But happy and alive? Instantly, it puts you on the back foot regarding this person and what they are trying to convey versus what they're really feeling. She then says, I'm here. I've been here every day since this. I'm not running and I'm not hiding. Well, no, you're not. You're getting hammered at a bar with your mum in full view of people who clearly are not very impressed with that. Also, you can't run and you can't hide because everyone's watching you, kid. You've literally got protesters outside of the door. If you walked out of the door with a suitcase or got in a car, people would be like, where are you going? Going nowhere. Just going in the car. Where are you going? I'm just going to go in the car with a small suitcase. I'm just going to drive somewhere. Okay, we're going to follow you as far as you go, as long as it takes. You're not leaving. So that's what would actually have happened. But she's using this as a, look at me. I'm clearly open, I'm clearly honest, I'm clearly authentic, I'm not running away, I'm not hiding, and that means I'm obviously innocent. She also said, and if something does come up that I'm at fault, I will take myself to that police station. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that's one of the strangest statements that I've ever heard. Let's just analyse that for a minute. If something does come up that I'm at fault, well, how will it come up that you're at fault? Unless you're at fault. How are you explaining that? Well, I'm just saying, if something comes up that I am at fault, I will take myself to the police station. So are you saying that somebody else would have to identify that you were at fault for you to do that? Because if you're at fault, you know you're at fault, which means that you can just cut out the middleman and go to the police station. I'm saying that if I'm at fault, bear in mind that somebody tells me I'm at fault, gives me reason that I'm at fault, evidences that they know I am at fault, then I will take myself to the police station. I don't think what you've said makes sense. I think what you're saying is, I am at fault, I'm hoping no one will find me at fault, but if it comes out that they do indeed find me at fault because I am at fault, then I will go to the police station because I'll have to, because I'm at fault. I think that's probably more where we're going with that. She also said that she was the victim of constant harassment. Just her. You know, just her being a victim. You're the victim. I'm a victim of harassment. Why? Because my child has disappeared in my care. The police have said it's me, and his body's potentially in landfill. I'm not sure that meets the level of you being somebody who's a victim. I think that makes you a major perpetrator. I am saying I'm being harassed. They're not leaving me alone when I'm getting blind drunk with my mother at bars. Honestly, people like you need their own private landfill. That's all I'm saying. Just like an own private landfill where you can just go and, I don't know, dissolve at some point. Anyway, again, I don't have a right, do I, to just throw in my own type of justice there. And clearly it would not be appropriate to just send individuals like her to landfill. I'm just saying, if it was, that would make me feel better at times. Anyway, as it happens, she's now the victim. She's saying that at the end of the day, she's the person being harassed. And she actually said it makes it hard to even process what's going around us. We get to the point where we have to barricade our home in order to even feel safe in our own backyard because we can't even process what is happening everywhere else or even have the time to do so. Well, that's because no one cares about you. That's the truth, isn't it? No one cares about you because the only person that we're caring about in this moment is Quinton, a beautiful little boy who's disappeared. So we're immediately in that statement introduced to her egocentricity, her absolute lack of self-awareness, her lack of care about her own child. She's thinking about herself. Of course, she's getting into circumstances where people are angry. And I'm not justifying that vigilante behaviour is acceptable. I'm saying I understand it. I understand where it comes from. It comes from a place where people have failed to protect the most vulnerable. And those individuals who are disgusted by it stand up for the individual who's been harmed. In this case, they are standing up for Quinton. She even went on to say, I can't even walk out and appreciate my own son's memorial or put down gifts that I got for him. I can't even go out there and do that without harassment and negligence and everything. It's just devastating to see that this is how the outside world reacts. Is it devastating? Is it devastating to see how the world reacts to your son's disappearance and the fact that the police are saying that you're the person responsible for his death? Is it strange? Are you friends with Casey Anthony? Are you genuinely best friends with Casey Anthony? Have you spoken to Casey Anthony and got the rule book of I'm the victim, not the perpetrator, even though I'm clearly the perpetrator manual? Just throwing it out there. But that's what she's saying. Now, on the 18th of November, very sadly, as we expect, the worst results are given, and that is that Quinton's remains have been found in the landfill exactly as law enforcement has said they would. So bones were actually found in the landfill. They were sent to the FBI to carry out the DNA analysis, and that grim and grotesque and very sad discovery brought to the end of a nearly 2-month search for the toddler. So it's just horrific. And again, I don't want to even begin to conceive or contemplate how that person finding those bones would have felt, because on one level, you're desperate to. You know, psychologically, professionally, emotionally, on every single level, you want to find those bones. You want to find that body. You want to bring that child home. You want to get justice for him. Equally, you don't, because it confirms that the worst case scenario is true. And you have to manage the reality of finding what should be a beautiful, bouncing baby boy. And instead, you find a bag of bones. 3 days after the remains were found, that's on the 21st of November, Leilani Simon was finally arrested. She'd been charged over Quinton's disappearance and alleged murder. So at this point, she is arrested and charged with malice murder, concealing the death of another person, false reporting, because as we know, she pretended that he'd just disappeared, also making false statements in connection with the disappearance and death of her 20-month-old son, Quinton Simon. She has sent law enforcement on a merry journey and now has to face the consequences of the reality of that journey being recognised as being false from the get-go. Now, on the 22nd of November, her arrest is made public and people celebrate that finally she is behind bars. On the 28th of November, the DNA analysis confirms that the remains are very sadly Quinton Simon's. So it's confirmed that those bones found in the landfill belong to him. An obituary is put out. It said, Quinton Simon was remembered as a bright, happy, fun, smart, loving little monkey. He was said to have always given everyone love. He would say thank you, no matter what it was. In the mornings, if the music was on, he would dance, smiling, spinning in a circle and clapping. Every time he did something he was proud of, he would come to whoever was close by and ask for boom, which was a little fist pump. You know, that in itself demonstrates how absolutely inconceivable it is that he ended up being murdered by his mother. The description of that angelic little boy is so far away from what we're dealing with in this moment. The destruction of that child, the child that brought so much joy clearly to everybody and anybody around him. It's disgraceful, it's disgusting, it's despicable, and it's unforgivable on every single level. And then throw that in that it is the mother who is charged with his murder. Now, since Quinton's death, the family's babysitter, Diana MacArthur, she described Leilani as being no mother of the year to any of her three children. So she basically is very clear that Leilani was not nice to any kids that she had. But she said it was her relationship with Quinton that was especially lacking in affection. She said that the relationship between the two of those was, quote, loveless, but she also noted that she did show her other children love and concern, but clearly not to a degree where she was considered a fit parent, because as noted by that same babysitter, she wasn't a mother of the year to any of them. And when it comes down to Diana MacArthur, I think that she genuinely does feel the absolute loss of Quinton. She's got involved in some really big rows with the grandmother in this case, who actually was accusing her of doing horrible things. And it was very, very volatile. And again, I would say the grandmother in this case is a very volatile person. No matter how emotional you are, there is a decorum of expectation behaviour-wise, and she fails on every level, both from the drinking in a bar with the daughter accused of the death of her grandson, and the way that she treats the babysitter in the arguments that I've seen play out. Now, reportedly, it was actually the grandmother in this case, Billie Jo Howell, who tipped the police off about her daughter's alleged involvement in her grandson's death. Like I said, very complex, isn't it, this? On one hand, she's out drinking with her daughter. On another hand, she's giving interviews saying that she's concerned about her daughter, and now we're finding out that actually she's the person who alleged to the police that the daughter should be the main suspect. Now, on the 12th of December, 45-year-old Billie Jo Howell was also arrested. So grandma got arrested at this point. They don't apparently relate to the death of Quinton, but nonetheless, there are obviously a complex web of problems within this family per se. So she was actually arrested at this point on charge of contempt. I would say that emotionally she was not in a good place. She was placed on suicide prevention watch after she claimed that she had basically lost everything. I do have some sympathy for the grandmother in this case. I don't think she's a terrible person, but she has raised this daughter who has become this monster. But I'm sure you've gathered from what I've talked about when it comes down to her relationship with Leilani, the two of those had some toxicity and had this fused relationship to some degree. That's why they're out drinking together, and had, I would say, a level of mass mistrust all going on. And the truth is that Billie Jo brought her up, helped to forge and create who she is, and allowed her to stay in the home when she shouldn't have, because Leilani should not have had any access to the children. She did not have primary access and custody of those kids. So there have been massive failures on Billie Jo's side as well. That said, I have more sympathy with her. Now, court documents actually describe how Leilani Simon is actually a chronic, unrehabilitated substance abuser of cocaine and cannabis. So we know that in the past she has had a lot of problems with drugs, and in the present she still has these issues. She also allegedly admitted to using cocaine and tested positive for the use of cocaine at the birth of one of her three children. So I would agree with the babysitter. She's certainly never been Mother of the Year at all. Now, prosecutors are alleging that the night before Leilani Simon actually went ahead and reported Quinton missing, she'd been out, met with a drug dealer, and she'd taken some unspecified drugs. She's accused then of basically striking Quinton with an unknown object, which caused him serious bodily injury, quote, so obviously some kind of blunt force trauma, and that this led to his death on the morning of the 5th of October, which is just before she actually goes ahead and reports him missing. They say that she then went and dumped Quinton's body in a trash bin outside the Azalea Mobile Home Park, which is about 1.5 miles from her home. So basically they are saying that she killed her son and then she disposed of him literally like rubbish. The idea that any living, breathing adult could treat a child this way is just beyond harrowing and also impossible to compute. But to put into picture and focus, the fact that we're talking about his mother here is heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. No matter how high and smashed she is on drugs, the idea of her hitting him so hard that she causes a really serious bodily injury, but then after realising that he's dead, decides that the best way forward is to throw him away like trash, to take his beautiful, yes, broken body, but beautiful nonetheless, and dispose of him in that way, to not call emergency services, to not ask for help, to not acknowledge in that moment you've done something absolutely terrible and tragic, but to actually think about your own needs, to actually consider your freedom, your liberty is more important than you taking accountability and responsibility for something so heinous. It is just so heartbreaking. That's the only word I can find for it. Heartbreaking. But of course, Leilani tells investigators that she had gone over to that particular dumpster, but it wasn't anything to do with the disposal of her child. No, she'd just gone there to dispose of, quote, normal household garbage. Now, I don't know about you guys. I have quite a lot of normal household garbage. I'm imagining that you have a bit of normal household garbage. And I don't know, sometimes I get to my bin and I'm like, oh, I've got my bin. I'm going to get it in my bag. I'm going to go and put it outside in my recycle bin. Oh, hang on a minute. Why would I do that? Why would I use my own bins? I need to drive 1.5 miles just outside some kind of trailer park and I'll use theirs. That seems like a totally irrational thing. If I'm not driving around on a Wednesday evening with bags of rubbish full of normal household waste to just go normally household waste elsewhere, I don't know what I'm doing. In fact, it's a veritable activity. My neighbours all get involved. It's quite a lot of fun. We just decide on different places we're going to, fly tip and go ahead and do it. I mean, from the get-go, this just sounds like BS, doesn't it? Why would you be taking your normal household garbage 1.5 miles away to dump? Makes no sense whatsoever. Now, as I've said, the indictment against Leilani Simon charges her with malice murder, false reports, concealing the death of another and other crimes in this 19-page court indictment. She's being held at the Chatham County Detention Centre. She, of course, has pled not guilty to all of the charges. Of course, she's going to plead not guilty to all of the charges because she doesn't want to get found guilty for a crime that she tried to cover up. That's why she dumped his body. That's why those bones were found in the landfill, because she had absolutely no intention whatsoever of taking responsibility for this. So going not guilty is par for the course in these cases. Now, following this indictment, the prosecution actually declined to release many further details, but did promise they were going to get justice for Quinton Simon. And the prosecutor said it's a matter that calls our very humanity into question. These are the cases that keep us up at night. Now, there has been a hearing in February 2023. This is where Quinton's grandmother, Billie Jo, handed over a series of notebooks, which all belonged to Leilani, so it'll be interesting to know what comes out in those notebooks. She actually handed over 8 notebooks. There'd been a subpoena issued the month before. Subpoena is when the court orders that information is passed over to them. So in my time working as a therapist for many, many years, I was subpoenaed on a couple of occasions because understandably, when you are an individual who makes notes about your clients, because it's important to keep appropriate records, it's part of our insurance, it's part of our agreement with our membership bodies, you want to keep those confidential, but at times, particularly if there is a prosecution occurring, they can subpoena notes that you would not ordinarily wish to hand over. You can agree to do it and say, here you go, or you can have it demanded of you. Like I said, it's only happened to me a couple of times during my career, but that was really helpful because actually we got a guilty on both counts because the person who had been seeing me had been abused very badly, and it actually helped to mirror what they told the police when years earlier they'd been working with me and working through their abuse. So it can be really, really helpful. It can also be highly incriminating, particularly, for example, if you're somebody who's written diaries that notes all the horrible things that you've done. And we've talked about that a great deal on this channel, covering lots of cases where killers have actually written large amounts of incriminating information in diaries, etc. So that will be interesting to see how it plays out. Now, there was also a motion for the Department of Family and Children's Services to turn over all the records related to the family, because understandably, let's be aware that there will be some kind of people that are going to be brought to task regarding how on earth it ended up that a parent who shouldn't have had custody of the child was being given an opportunity to look after the child that actually died in their care. Now, in March 2023, Chatham County Judge Tammy Stokes denied Leilani bond, despite her defence teams arguing that she should be reunited with her remaining children, a 4-year-old boy and a 9-month-old girl. Why? Why should there be any argument over that? I mean, my goodness, she shouldn't be allowed within 100 feet of her children. She's a danger to her children. They also, as a defence team, said that she didn't pose a flight risk, but the judge saw through that and denied her bond. They said that she was absolutely considered a flight risk. Of course she's considered a flight risk. She's banged to rights. She's probably going to go to prison, potentially for the rest of her natural life. So she would absolutely be in a scenario where she might want to try to get away from these charges by running, full stop. Now, in March 2024, Leilani Simon appeared in court. The judge expressed at this point that she would actually like to put the case to trial before the end of the year. Now, in April 2024, there was another hearing. So Leilani Simon's attorneys wanted things discounted from evidence. So they didn't want the recordings of the 911 call and the interviews with the police and FBI to actually be entered into evidence at trial. So they argued that the statements were basically not given willingly. And that to me speaks volumes, doesn't it? It's like, so Judge, we're just asking, don't know how you're feeling about this, Judge, but we're just asking, stroke hoping, stroke really, really wishing that you're not going to disagree with us when we say we think it's unfair that the 911 call that she made to the emergency services, where she's clearly making up a complete story, we'd say that it would be better if that was not actually put into evidence. And also, ideally, any of the interviews that she actually had with the police and the FBI, you know, where she's just changing a story constantly and just, I don't know, comes across as, one could suggest, guilty. We're saying it would be really great if we could just not have those entered. Right, okay, so you're asking me as a judge to just not enter anything that could essentially incriminate her by her own words and actions. Absolutely. You're so on the same page with me on this, Judge. You're a very good judge. Is that possible? No. I take that back. I object. I don't think you're nice anymore. And actually, I think you're very cruel that you're allowing this very incriminating evidence of my client, where they are basically incriminating themselves, into court. That's what I'm saying. Sustained. Anyway, this is what is playing out in court. So the 911 call is played in court. The 911 call actually included Leilani wailing in the background and telling the operator, I can't find my son, I can't find my 1-year-old son. So, you know, really playing it up essentially for the person on the end of the phone. And you just have to consider how diabolical that is when we know that the likelihood is that she's dumped that little boy's body after murdering him in a trash can. And yet here she is playing actor of the year, essentially. Also, during the call, Leilani and her boyfriend tell the dispatcher that they found the front door open and that the child must have been abducted. So again, just lying through their teeth. And also they played in the court parts of 4 separate interviews that highlighted her story just evolving from her saying that she was home and in bed at midnight before discovering Quinton was missing at 9 a.m. to then admitting that she'd been out driving to a gas station at 1:25 a.m. Then in another interview, a detective actually accuses Leilani of needlessly accusing her ex and Quinton's father of being involved. And in the interview, she can be heard repeatedly denying being involved in Quinton's disappearance. She's telling detectives, if I did something, you all would have found it. So the defense argued that during some of the interviews, she had basically invoked her Fifth Amendment rights to remain silent and to have an attorney present. So they're saying this means that the statements afterwards should be revoked. But the prosecution were not happy with this. They pushed back. They claimed that her Fifth Amendment invocations had no legal effect since they didn't actually happen while she was in custody, and that she chose to make voluntary statements to law enforcement. Now, Judge Stokes did not actually make a ruling on the motion, even though I believe that that motion will be they can be introduced. Nonetheless, they haven't actually as yet made a ruling on the motion. So that was the last time that Leilani actually appeared in court. So at this point, both of the sides are actually preparing for trial. Now, I'm assuming that Leilani Simon's defence strategy is going to basically focus on several key arguments, which are all aimed at challenging the prosecution's case and the admissibility of that evidence. So as I've said, the team have argued that some of her statements to the police should be thrown out because of the Fifth Amendment rights issue. She wanted to remain silent and request an attorney. That was apparently denied. But like I said, the prosecution are pushing back on that. But I think they're going to really powerfully go for this idea that those rights were failed and try to get this stuff non-admitted to the actual case. I also think that what they might do is bring in her mental health. You know, she's obviously been in a scenario where she's tried to take her life before, according to one of her partners. Therefore, we could say that maybe that will be used as this was done in the heat of a moment. It's not somebody who's gone ahead and planned and premeditated the murder of Quinton. So that could also be part of the defence. Also, on the night before Quinton's disappearance, apparently she used drugs. This has been highlighted by the prosecution as part of the narrative of neglect and culpability, but it could also be leveraged by her defence to say that the state of mind when she actually killed him shows the potential lack of intent or premeditation. And also, I suppose, the defence could argue that there's no evidence that she directly killed Quinton. So they could argue that, yes, Quinton was killed, but that it could have been somebody else in the household who killed him. And often you'll hear in cases like this that that's the kind of argument that they use. They have no argument that the child's been murdered. The child has been murdered. The child's body ended up at landfill. However, what we're telling you is it wasn't Leilani Simon who actually killed him. So again, they will probably be directing, why are you choosing her as the individual who's responsible? There are all these other potential parties who could have been responsible. She could be telling the truth that actually he just disappeared and she believed that he had been abducted, but really another person in the household killed him. That's why she acted in that manner, because she genuinely thought he had been abducted. But again, whether that will be strong enough to convince the jury is highly unlikely, I would say. So overall, I think what the defence are going to do is really go for those procedural defences related to her statements, and that's going to be the main narrative that they put together regarding how this has played out. Also, it's worth noting that there's been a report about his death, which has been led by Senator John Ossoff, and it was titled Abuse and Neglect of Children in Georgia's Foster Care System, and it listed the Quinton Simon case as a child death that may have been prevented if it weren't for the mismanagement of the Georgia foster care system. And that is harrowing. Whenever we hear about this, that, you know, children have died, and then we realise that the reason that they have died is because there has been so much mismanagement in their care by the authorities who are essentially meant to have protected them, that really does leave you with a series of big questions. And it happens all the time. How many times do I say on this channel, lessons will be learned? That's what they always say, lessons will be learned. And it's like, okay, well, if lessons are getting learned, why on earth am I telling the same story again and again and again and again? And when it comes down to Quinton Simon, the suggestion is that there were certain measures that could have happened, that should have happened, that would mean that Quinton is living his life as that lovely, cheeky, happy kid who has a whole life ahead of him to thrive within. And instead we're talking about his bones being found in a landfill after being dumped by the person who should have protected him more than anybody else in the world. Like I said, I haven't got a result of how many years she's going to get. I do imagine it's probably going to be something as serious as life without parole. I will be so intrigued as to see whether the procedural issues that are being levied by the defence are actually considered appropriate by the judge and therefore not admissible in court. That said, I genuinely feel that she is guilty beyond measure, and I'd be really surprised if a jury didn't come to the same conclusions. Let me know your thoughts on this case, guys. Like I said, I haven't got the actual sentence yet. I will put it in the description below when I find it out. But let me know your thoughts. I'll see you again as ever next time. Be safe, everyone.